All right, so he's got to start identifying a problem here, and this is an engine repair thing, so be prepared for this, but I got other things I want to talk to you about too. Everybody that does vehicle inspections has to advise the customer what needs to be doing right away and what can be put off for a while, and they have to be a thorough inspection. So basically, one of the problems that we have whenever we do inspections over and over and over again is we have a tendency not to take them seriously. And I've seen people do that before, where they were, they were doing if this inspection, don't sit in that chair. No, that's not the one you're gonna sit in. But anyway, but that is one of the things that, don't jerk on my cord either. So we gotta make sure that we're looking at stuff really good. We did a 29-point inspection on every vehicle at the Ford dealer, and the mechanic with integrity will take the inspection seriously. They got a yellow, in that particular inspection sheet, they had a green, a yellow, and a red. Green means it's okay, yellow means it's gonna need service soon, and red means you need to do something right now. As on vehicles that have to be trusted to keep people safe, the inspection is really important. So, and that's more to it than upsell, right? So if we don't take the inspection seriously, we can miss something that's important. It can range from embarrassing to deadly. You remember the story I told you about the 2010 Fusion that the lower control arm bolt was just about out of, and she kept going back to the place where she bought the car, and she said, I'm hearing a noise under there, and they said, we don't work on those, so you need to take it somewhere else. And if that lower control arm had come out while she was driving down the road 60, 70 miles an hour, it would have been a problem. You know what I mean? And they kept,
My tire fell off about 55.
Yeah, that's but you can have all kinds of issues with that. Well, there was this young guy that I knew replaced the taillight fuse, checked off the boxes on the inspection sheet, never opened the hood. When they went to jump it off out there on the lot because he left the lights on, they had a squirrel nest on the battery. And he had checked every sheet, every box on the sheet like he had checked it all out. I handed an inspection sheet to one new student out here one time a few years ago, and I said, this is what you're supposed to check on this car and all that. And so I stood back over here and I watched him. He didn't know I was watching him. And he was standing in front of the car just checking off boxes. You know what I mean? What's wrong with that picture, right? You don't want to go there. All right. If something happens to the person driving a vehicle, the inspected can be traced to the negligence. In other words, that's not worded all that well, but the simple fact is, insurance investigators love it if you just worked on the car and then it crashed. Right? High mount stoplight is another thing I talk about a lot. Look at this right here. A Vermont automotive technician was arrested August 11th for manslaughter following what an automotive trade group called a carelessly incomplete inspection. He didn't even inspect the brakes, and the lady crashed and died. And so now he's looking at 15 years in jail and a $3,000 fine. Because, well, he didn't take his inspection seriously. Now, granted, that was a state that requires vehicle inspections, but it was like you've done so many inspections, you feel like it'd be A8, like he was saying a while ago. And next thing you know, boom, blows up in your face and all that, right? But anyway, you're 40% more likely to get rear-ended if your high mount stoplight doesn't work. That's an actual news story. You can Google that. You can look that up.
40%. They give you a ticket if you don't have it. That ain't like the other two are working, but the top one ain't working. They give you a ticket.
Yeah, the top one. The tag light. You'll get a ticket for the tag light. Now, and think about this. I brought my car to have you inspect it, and you checked everything except the tag light, and that night I got a traffic ticket because my tag light wasn't working. You just inspected it yesterday. I'm not going to be happy with you. I'm going to expect you probably to pay my ticket, or I'm probably going to go to the newspaper.
Well, what if it was working when you worked on it?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Well, if I just went out.
Well, that's your word against theirs. You know what I'm saying?
I'll be taking pictures.
That's not a bad idea. Really, it's not. As a matter of fact, whenever we used to, a lot of times we'd pull in there, people would if you got a big shop where a lot of work's flowing through there, they'll try to take you for a ride. And so what our service riders would do is walk around the car and make note of anything that wasn't right in the way of, like I was talking about on the air conditioning, make sure there's little cracks. If there's little cracks on the dash, make sure the customer knows that whenever you get through working on the air conditioner and pulling the dash out, there may be big cracks where the little ones were, and there's nothing you can do to stop that.
Yep. Richard, you talking about that? Oh, we had a car coming there Thursday at Matt's, and the motor mounts was broke, and the axle was hitting the control arm. Anyhow, somebody I done all the work and I got done with it. And I was walking around the car checking it over before I drove it. Someone took the back wheel where the spokes come. It was like an aftermarket wheel, probably had like 8 spokes. 2 of them was broke slamming too, and they put JB Weld around them.
If you fail to check the final, that's funny. If you fail to check the final driving lubricant on a Toyota Camry or a Corolla, and think about this, 80 miles an hour in Atlanta, you ever notice how whenever you're worried that you're running too close to the car in front of you and you slip back off a little and somebody rams another car in there so that you're just forced to follow and all that really fast? And you remember what I was talking about on that on the driveline aspect of this? If that little housing that houses the differential in those Toyota Corollas and Camrys goes dry of grease, you know, your dipstick in your transmission doesn't check that because it's a different wall cavity. You got to pull a little plug out, just like on the rear end, and check it. And people don't think about that when they're inspecting one of these old cars. And you can be driving along, and when that thing locks up, it's going to be suddenly, it's like you slammed on the brakes. Because I've seen it happen. Some students were coming around the bypass on one of the little Toyota Corollas that did it. But pay attention to that. So if anything, if you find an oil leak, you need to see where it's coming from. Is this dangerous? Is it something that's going to happen? Take this seriously, because that's what we're all about. Well, here we are. This month's story is around Dodge Dakota. It is one of our vehicles that developed an oil leak between the passenger side cylinder head and the engine block, and the driver picked it up as an oil smell. He said, "I'm smelling oil." And so I'm looking over here, and we'll get up under it and look around, and you can see where there's oil coming from under the head gasket. Now this one here has got a pressurized oil feed that goes through the head gasket to the timing chains, and it was coming from under the head gasket, and it was trickling down, and it was continually dripping on the exhaust. Now that, whether you want to, you know, like you say, well, a lot of the time you ain't going to see a problem with that, but it's a fire hazard whether you like it or not. And if it keeps trickling oil on the exhaust, if it catches fire, and then other things catch fire, it doesn't take much for a vehicle to burn all the way to the rims, you know. So that's not as much of a, usually not as much of a liability for the person as it is for, although it can be, for the vehicle getting destroyed. So overhead cam engines have that pressurized oil feed. This one had that. So this revealed oil seepage. It was wet enough to make it back to the exhaust manifold right above the header pipe, and it was also dripping on the, it had dripped on the control arm bushings, and it deteriorated them too because they don't like oil. Well, and that's what I was talking about, the fire hazard. There was no valve cover oil leak from above the cylinder head block joint, and the exhaust was cooking the oil before it ever dropped to the ground, so the leak was smelled but not seen by the driver. So how likely it was to catch fire is not as pertinent as what could happen if it did. So it wouldn't be a cheap fix if you've been, done a oil leak on a 3.7 or pulling the heads off a 3.7. It's not as simple as putting them on a 350 Chevrolet or something. The wonderful world of overhead driven cams, you're going to have to put the chains on it and all that. Now there was a guy that came in here yesterday, and think about this for a second. He's got a 2000 Mustang GT with a 4.6 in it, right? And he said that somebody had, you know, failed to put a plug back in there, right, and it blew the spark plug out of the hole. All right, and so it tore the threads up.
It's probably on probably the third one back on driver's side, ain't it?
You know, I don't know which one it is. He didn't show me the vehicle. He just came talking about it. And he said he took it to a shop over there somewhere, and they want to replace that head and put timing chains on it and head gaskets and all that kind of stuff. And what do you suppose that cost? What would be a fair price for that? He found a head for $200.
They probably charge about $1,500 for a head off.
$2,600 is what they're wanting to do that. Now that sounds a little steep to me, because it's 7.3 hours to do both heads, and then the timing chain would be.
Most places charge $70 an hour though.
Well, $100 an hour would only be $730 labor though. See what I'm saying? That's pretty steep.
Paying for the, what a timing change for them.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got a bottom line, and everybody's got to, you know, but I mean, all I do when I'm looking at a situation like that, when somebody's asking me, is that too much money, I look up the labor times. You know what I mean? And then I look up the cost of the parts, list costs. You know, you go by the list price on the parts, which is basically, you know, what you would charge in a situation like that. If you got a shop, you're going to look up, you go, now if you're going to get the jobber price, and you know, your markup on your parts is part of your money and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes whenever I go through that, I'll go through everything I could possibly come up with for, you know, how to figure this thing, how to figure this estimate where it would be fair. And sometimes the estimate that I'm looking at will be like $1,000 more, you know, than what I can even squeeze out being really generous in the, labor time, so I don't know what's going on there, but anyway. But I told him, I said, if that was my car, I'd get a motor for it. Before I would spend that much money just putting, head gas, a head, used head and all that stuff on it, I'd get a motor.
When they make a kit now, you can take drill a spark plug hole out.
You sure can, you can fix them spark plug holes pretty easy, anyway, one way or another. But the timing chain set alone on this Dodge is $500, almost $500. Just the time, if you buy the timing chain set from the parts store, it's $480 for the timing chain set. And if you're gonna pull the heads off on a higher mileage vehicle, may as well put the timing chain set with a slider on it, all that kind of thing. Well, he had the timing cover, intake valve covers off pretty quick, and I told him, when you're doing this, go ahead and pop those roller rockers out of there. Those little roller rockers, you can just pop out of there real easy on these overhead cam engines. Explorers are like that, Crown Victorias are like that, your Dodges are like that. They all got those little roller rockers. Make sure that the egg is up on your thing. Pop them all out of there. And that way, none of the valves are open. It's easier. You can actually, whenever you're putting it in time, it's real easy to turn the gears and all that. And so, but this is an interference engine and it will bend valves. So the cams aren't hard to turn and the valves will be closed when you got all those roller rockers out. Well, what did he do? He took the roller rockers out of one side but decided, heck, I'm not gonna worry with that on the other side. I'll just make sure that the camshaft doesn't move and it'd be a 8, like you were saying. All right. All right. He did pop them out of both heads when he replaced the valve stem seals. He disassembled the timing chains, took the heads off, but he put the rockers, actually, I'll take this back, he put the rockers back in there on one head but not on the other one. Cleaned everything up, and he started putting it back together. Well, the simple fact was, I told him the rocker arms needed to be left on the bench while he was installing the heads. Don't put those back in there yet while you got the heads. So I noticed he left the rocker arms out of the driver's side head, but installed them in the passenger side head. It's really, it says an idea, but it was a bad idea. So he torques the head. Turns out since the rocker arms were in place, there were valves touching the pistons whenever he torques it down.
Bend the valve.
Yep, bent the valves. Also, it prevented the head from being torqued all the way down, so there was a water passage that had free rein to send water into the wall and all that. Okay, so he finished assembling everything. The engine started, ran for about 20 seconds, went to making a noise in the timing chain area, and then died. That makes you sick. You want to hear it run real smooth, right? And all that. So, long and short of it is, that wasn't enough. When we checked the oil, the coolant had gone into the crankcase because the head gasket didn't seal, so the head needed to come back off. More about that in a minute. Now, we're going to pull off of that one for a second. We're going to think about something else. Sometimes you find something if you're concerned about somebody's well-being, and you don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. But one customer brought us a 2002 Chevy Silverado for an oil change, a U-joint, and some brake work. So we get to work on that. But look what we found whenever we pulled the drain plug out. Does that bother you a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? A valve keeper. This is a magnet, right? This plug's got a magnet on it, and that valve keeper was stuck to that magnet when we screwed it out of there. Should we worry about this or should we not worry about it? She wasn't having any problem, we wouldn't necessarily be responsible. Basically, I just told her, I said, look, we found a valve keeper stuck to that. I don't know if that came off one of your valves or what. All right, now, we play with the light. All right, so what do we do? So, did he pick up a valve keeper? Did somebody screw this off doing an oil change, lay it on the bench, and pick up a valve keeper without realizing it and screw it back in there? I don't know. Now, I will tell you this. We haven't seen that truck since. So, actually she's had other work done, but she hadn't had any more trouble, so maybe it'd be all right. And one valve keeper will hold it in most cases, but I don't like that.
How did you buy a piston?
Huh?
Why didn't it come out of the piston, went down an oil journal, didn't it?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know. It could have been. It could have gone down in the pan, but in the drain back holes, in the oil. So anyway, it looked like a little bit small, like it came from the, it looked like it came off of something else that had a smaller valve, but whatever. Anyway, now here's some noises that telegraph. We burned some time chasing this exhaust leak noise on a 2008 Altima, and it sounded like it was coming from up in the passenger side intake manifold area, and the exhaust is a long way from the place where we were picking up the sound. So Melissa decided to remove the exhaust heat shield. She managed to short the alternator out and blow the main fuse to the battery. That was an accident, because we had to buy a $26 fuse from Nissan to replace it, and I've got that fuse around here somewhere. But anyway, she did use a stethoscope and found out the catalyst was leaking from a crack on the top rear of the cat's case, and that was going up through that cover, underneath that engine cover on top, and we were hearing it back in the back. And the heat shield funneled it up that way. So this is what it looked like. The noise was originating on the catalyst underneath here, and it was going up through here, under that cover, and we were hearing it back here. So that way it telegraphed the noise up in there. And basically what we had, and that's not a really good picture, I got better pictures somewhere, there was a crack in the catalytic converter right there. And the catalytic converter on that car cost as much as a good used car. So I had to take the cat off of it, and I carried it over there to the welding department and had them MIG it up. And it looked really good. Never had any more problems with that one. All right, so one of the more interesting quickies, I gotta turn this off so you can see the picture. 2002 Mazda 626 had low brake fluid pedal. Some of you might remember this if you were in here at brakes. It looked like V8 vegetable juice. Anybody remember that one? That's 626. That brake fluid looked terrible. It literally looked like V8 vegetable juice, which means, what does that mean? It's got rust in it, right? And it had some water in there. All right, so we found this rust, this putty in the reservoir, same color as the fluid, no flakes of rust. It was just really, really fine. I'll tell you something else. Iron oxide, which is rust, can be fine enough to where it'll go through a fuel filter on a vehicle and get in the injectors. I mean, it's really super, super fine. So we didn't find any ray flakes of rust that are going to cut the rubber seals, and dot 3 fluids hygroscopic. What does that mean? That's good. All right. I wondered if, yeah, you could read the thing, then let's see. I wondered if there was somebody that poured water in the master cylinder at some point. Now, I did have a student around here one time that took my 2006 Sonata, and he was going to add some brake fluid, and what did he do? Somehow or another, he poured power steering fluid in the brake fluid reservoir. And then he caught himself about the time he did it, and so we got it back out of there, and it didn't cause any problem. What happens if you pour oil in the brake fluid?
It swells up those rubber gaskets.
Everything swells up that's rubber in that whole system, and the brakes just lock down. Now the brakes don't fail, everything seizes up and you won't go because the brakes are seized up. And that's what picture goes on there. All right, we replaced the master cylinder, flushed the brakes. I pumped about a gallon of fluid through there to flush it out, and it stopped really good. The pedal was high and firm, and her mama's still driving the car, because this lady that I know, it's her mother's car. If it had been equipped with ABS, it would have been a little more troubling, but as it was, it worked just fine. All right, now then, Bobby got the head back off the Dodge and found out he had bent 3 intake valves, so I ordered 3 brand new $16 intake valves. We lapped them in, checked the seats with Prussian blue. What's Prussian blue?
Some paint stuff you put on.
Stuff you put on there to make sure. I'll tell you a little something else. We were talking about them heads on them Ford engines that, you know, the spark plug is way down in a hole. All right, so we basically, if you're going to work on fixing the threads in a spark plug hole on one of them engines, what do you need to do to keep the filings from your thread tap from falling down in there?
What I do is I'd pull it up on where the intake, or no, the exhaust valve's open, and blow, like once you clean it out, blow air through it and clean it out.
Well, what I do, that's what my dad taught me eons ago, open the throttle and put your air blower in there, and you know, just tape it shut or use a tie wrap or whatever. And so with that air blowing into the intake, if you turn the engine over by hand until there's a bunch of air coming out because the intake valve is open, you got air coming out the whole time. You know, it's always coming out. So when you run your tap down in there, you get a 12 millimeter 1 1/4 pitch thread if you're just trying to fix the existing threads. As you turn that up, every one of those little pieces that breaks off will come out. They won't ever go down in there, you know, and get trapped over there where they're going to score the cylinder walls and all that kind of stuff. Well, anyway, we did that, and I ran that thread tap down in there real pretty and smooth, and then I took a spark plug, and when I put in there, it was aggravating to start, and I couldn't tell if it was going all the way down or not. And you can't look in there and tell. I guess you could count the turns, but I wanted to be sure that that beveled spark plug seat was going against the head. Now, why is that important?
So it don't leak compression.
Not just that.
And it don't back out.
It ain't just that. Whenever that bevel seat or that washer is against the head, that's how the heat gets out of the spark plug and is carried away. And if you leave a spark plug a little bit loose, then that spark plug is going to get really, really hot. We've had it happen here. on a little 4-cylinder engine this one lady's got over there, and it looked like you put a torch on that spark plug because it wasn't tight. It gets overheated, the plug, and burned it slam up. And then we had to fix the threads with a thread insert and all that kind of stuff. But the simple fact is, on that one I put Prussian blue on that that little bevel right there at the base of the threads, and I screwed it down in there until it stopped, and then I screwed it back out, and I saw that the Prussian blue showed that I had made good seat contact. See, if I didn't see that that Prussian blue was squished out and made good seat contact, I knew we got issues. All right, anyway, the Prussian blue, basically, we were going to make sure the valves were seating okay, and we did that. Really, anything wrong with the seats, didn't need a valve job per se. So he gets the Dodge back together. We started it again with new oil and coolant, and the passenger side timing chain was throwing a rattling fit. We yanked the cover off and started the engine with the change exposed, and the tensioner was bouncing this ratchet mechanism. Can't take the pressure. The oil pressure is what actually causes this tensioner to do that. Now I got a little video of that in just a second. It's 14 seconds long. He took the tensioner back off, and the tensioner, by the way, is right over here. And whenever that particular tensioner that came to us, they had put some foil on the back of the tensioner to protect it, to keep from getting trash in it, and he didn't notice that it fell off the tensioner on the other side, but on this one, he didn't notice the foil, and he put it on there with the foil on, and no oil could get into the tensioner. That was what happened. It was a simple little mistake, but there's a piece of foil that's kind of shaped like it right there. Of course, that's just a plate there, but that little foil was doing that. But anyway, so the new tensioner was held onto its foil too long. But we put the original tensioner back on that side, and things got nice and quiet. And we ran it for a little while. Notice we still had an oil leak, and between the gasket and the head and all that kind of stuff. And so we had to put another valve cover gasket on it to stop that. So we originally go back to start an oil leak, wound up with one come from under the valve cover that wasn't there before. But he now knows this really good. And I don't know what happened to that video. Maybe I was supposed to play that video earlier. Let me see if I still got a video in here, because I did save one. Let's see. Is that a video? See that thing moving? On the left side over there. Now, the reason it was moving was because there was some oil pressure going into that tensioner. And we just fired it up with the cover off and everything. All right. All right. So now that I click that, it wants to play the video again. It is kind of fun to watch, though, isn't it? All right, now notice this. See where this is? This right here looks sort of like a timing chain on one of your old engines, but it's basically driving these other ones that are going up here. Oh, one more thing while I'm talking to you guys about this. If you ever get in a timing chain to put on one of these, make doggone sure it's got the same number of holes and the same pattern of holes in that thing right there. Because there are two different ones, and if you happen to put this thing all the way back together with the wrong timing chain set on it, then it ain't gonna start. If that's not right, and I've known of that happening. My buddy Donnie got one that came to his shop. It was a Dodge that somebody put timing chains on all, it wouldn't start, or it may have been a different engine, I don't know. But whatever happened, this was different, and the pattern wasn't right, and it basically, was kicking back and cutting up and all that kind of thing. So always compare your parts really carefully. One of my guys was doing a 4.7 like that with a Euro truck, and he had the timing chain and was getting ready to put it on there, and I said, let's compare these first, and it was wrong, and we had to get him to send us another chain. And so you just about cost yourself a whole lot of money on that.
So, did that 3.7 y'all did it have the balancing shaft in the center?
Not well, if it did. No, I don't, well, yeah, I think it may have, but we didn't go that deep into that. All right, let me back up. I went too far. All right, when you do timing chains on an engine like this, always remove the rockers. Don't give up till you're done, even if things seem to be going bad. You ever done a job that went bad on you? Listen to him. No, I don't reckon I ever have. Everybody has had a job they did that went bad on them. I mean, like trying to do some kind of work that was just really, kind of started beating you up. I don't care who you are or how good you think you are. I knew this one guy was a really good mechanic that put the wrong oil pump in a car, and it came off an engine that turned the opposite direction. He didn't have no oil pressure, and he had to go back in there and change the oil pump. Don't lay out of work hoping somebody else will finish your job. One of the most aggravating things in the world is this one guy that was working at this, I was working at this dealership back in the early 80s, and they gave him a job he didn't want. And so he says, he told the service manager, he was kind of a, petty. And he told the service manager, you told me that you weren't gonna give me another one of these next time somebody else would get it. And he said, well, you're up for the job and it needs to be done. But what it was a 72 Volkswagen bus that had one of those Porsche engines in it that you had to pull it out and replace the crankshaft seal, and he didn't want to do it because it was really aggravating. It wasn't a gravy job. And so he got in his car and left, went home. And so they gave it to me and I did it, but the thing about it is, huh?
They fire him?
Well, he was the nephew of the guy that owned the dealership. If the nephew, you're not gonna get fired. Now, he got yelled at a lot by the guy that owned the dealership, but he didn't get fired. But anyway, later on, he, got tired of working on cars and we decided to be a farmer or something. But anyway, you're gonna own your success. Whatever success you have, you're on. And I'll tell you something else, there ain't nothing that feels any better than getting one fixed when you've been fighting with it for a while. That's just all there is to it. Ain't that right? I saw him doing that. Yes, sir. This way, good. That's like being at an auction and buying a tractor because you fixed your hat, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah.